So it's election day in America, and I can't even vote because I'm not an American. And I observe people going through the many emotions of the voting process. Some people feel very optimistic of when things are looking good on their side. Some people think very pessimistic, and then the results start rolling in, and blah blah blah. All these emotions run high, emotions run low, and things like that, right? And as I observe this, voting situation as from the perspective of somewhat of a foreigner, right? I see uh, many different perspectives, but the one perspective that I want to talk about today is the perspective that it doesn't really matter, right? Um, Elections don't change anything. Elections don't do anything. So regardless of who wins, we're just kind of fucked. And this kind of a pessimistic outlook is, fairly common. And it's not really difficult to see why people think this way, right? Because when you follow the money, um, both parties are basically, in America, both parties are basically being supported by, the same kind of big money donors. And when you look at the full range of the political spectrum, like the right leans fairly right, but the left isn't really that left compared to other countries' standards of left, right? So, again, because why? America is largely a very capitalistic kind of a country, so when the people with capital, the entities with capital, they of course want vested interest in capital, right? Or in policies that will protect their capital. So that's why, like, it's technically like I. That's the whole argument, right? Like, it's a two-party system, but is it really when the actual dominating force of the political landscape is in the end capital? So also, like, Trump was president, but the world didn't end. And Biden was president, but then, like, life didn't significantly improve. And so this is kind of what people tend to think, right? And it's understandable. And the other side of why we think like this is because, we don't want to get disappointed. Nobody wants to be disappointed at the results of anything. So, in a way, it looks really similar to depression. Because depression is also like everything is pointless. What's the point of me, like putting in the work? What's the point in trying to do self-development? Like in the end it doesn't even matter, like Linkin Park says, right? And so this kind of a mentality can be seen as kind of a self-protective. It's a protective mechanism for the mind. If I set up too many expectations of myself, then ultimately I have to be disappointed. And by being overly pessimistic, I just kind of completely eradicate the possibility of being disappointed. But that is all predicated on one assumption. And it's that when we expect something, when we want something, we have to be disappointed when it doesn't happen. But that doesn't really need to be the case, right? It's not set in stone that you have to be disappointed when the world doesn't give you what you want. Yes, it does feel extremely disappointing, and it does feel very painful for you when the thing that you really yearn doesn't come true, right? But that is bordering on the area of suffering. It's the unhealthy kind of attachment to the desire, right? So, I, for example, want pizza tomorrow for lunch, but then tomorrow at work we decided to collectively eat Mediterranean food and vegetarian, and so I'm like, oh man, I really wanted pizza. But, like, it's not that big of a deal, right? Unless I make it a really big deal and then I get really angry and I get consumed by my desire. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? So, yes, I can want a particular party to win, but at the same time, when the party I want to win, if they don't win, I am not a slave to that situation. I'm not a dependent variable on anything. That is the idea that I really want to, have you evaluate if the election means so much emotional distress for you. Whether the party you want wins or not, it's not a must, because there are people whose desired parties don't win, but they're fine, right? So why that matters is, if it's a universal reason to suffer, then it needs to globally apply to everyone, right? So we have to understand that, yes, many times, and it's not even related to politics, many times in life we are not necessarily going to get the things that we want. But if we get disappointed every time when that happens, then that's a very surefire way to being depressed, right? But I want to offer you the other alternative, the middle way, so to speak, from the Buddhist perspective, that you don't have to be emotionally devastated when things don't go your way, because life will go on, right? I'm not asking you to be optimistic all the time. I'm not asking you to completely eradicate your pessimism. We all have those days, right? We all have those days where we feel good, where we feel bad. So look at that kind of a large, long frame of life. And in the end, suppose 20 years pass and you're taking a reflection of your life. 20 years spent with the ups and downs and always being controlled and dominated by what your emotion wants out of you, versus 20 years of actually doing things that will make your desired outcome come true. So for example, why does it even need to involve parties in the first place? Suppose there's a social change you want, right? If you can rally the people that you need, if you can get the resources that you need from people, and you become kind of like a social entrepreneur, and then you start solving local problems and such, you're contributing to making the world that you want to live in, right? And 20 years of doing that. In one world, you spend 20 years feeling bad, feeling good, riding the ups and downs of life, but then ultimately, you don't really contribute anything to making the world that you want, outside of, voting and then, thinking and, forming opinions about what should happen. And I'm saying, yes, it's okay to feel stuff, but isn't it so much better when you actually spend time cultivating and creating the world that you want to live in? And suppose you do agree with me here. Suppose you do think that, hey, you know what? Doing something to create the world I want to live in, that sounds really nice. In that case, isn't it better to not be affected by emotion? Because when your emotion is in charge of what you do and don't do, then you're a dependent variable under the master of emotion, right? But you're not. Truthfully, you are the owner of your emotions. It may not feel like it, but all the emotions are under your control and your experience, right? So, on this election day, for Americans, things may not go your way, regardless of what party you are. And your president may win, but then your local office might not, and your local office might, but then the propositions in your state might not be in your favor. But what matters more? Being part of the creative force that makes the world you want to live in, or being swept away by your feelings?